My name is Jamal Thomas. This is After Hours with Jamal Thomas. I can't think of a better word for it. Basically, the Jamal Thomas show, but I'm doing it in evenings. Under normal circumstances, this takes place from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m., Monday through Friday. The voice in your ear as you go to work, or for that matter, as you clean the house, whatever you're doing in the morning, this is the voice that's in your ear, giving you news, politics, culture, and all that good stuff. I have a great show for you today. Virginia, my hometown, has purged about 1,600 voters. I mean, given the the volume of the case, you would think it would a lot more people that were being purged. But it became a big issue. Now, the reason it became a big issue because apparently people could self-identify as being non-eligible to vote, and when Democrats pointed out, "Whoa, what are you doing? This is an issue." And it's taking place just before the election. Republicans turn around and say, "See, we knew that you wanted non-citizens to be able to vote." And then they would say, what person in their right mind could want somebody who is not supposed to vote? Meaning it became immediately politically fractious right off the bat, as one of those political wedge issues, or at the very least an issue that groups get into a fight. The Supreme Court gets involved, and the Supreme Court comes down on the side of Virginia, effectively saying, yes, the purge can go through. You can get rid of those people that self-identified. Now, the catch becomes whether or not there are larger consequences than the individuals who self-identified, as some of the voting groups basically were pointing out, and part of the reason that they were bringing the lawsuit in the first place, saying, you are going to eliminate people who are actual voters, and you're going to disenfranchise those voters. So Susan Bai has been a great friend of the show, and I was super interested in what she had to say because she has been as down the middle as a person can be on this stuff, and I've always appreciated her take. So, Susan, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Hi, Jamal. I'm fine. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween back at you. And just to give you your invitation, your bio, Susan Pai has a degree in psychology from UCLA, where she worked at the internationally recognized UCLA Brain Mapping Lab. She attended law school at the University of Louisville and Nyoga University in Japan, and has assisted in the Senate Judiciary Committee on fraud and abuse in the business, immigration, civil matters. Susan has also submitted testimony for the House Judiciary Committee and humanitarian immigration issues. So she is infinitely well qualified to have this conversation. And like I said, I've always appreciated your point of view on this stuff because oftentimes on the show you bring people they have a heavily ideological bend one way or the other, and I get sick of it. I just want to know what's true.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to bring this to you. What is the main issue that the Supreme Court was reviewing? I mean, I know Virginia had the voter purge law, and apparently, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm saying any of this wrong, people could self-identify and basically say, well, I am not eligible to vote. So I am either non-citizen or at the very least not eligible to vote. And so Virginia came up with the idea, okay, well, why are these people on the voter rolls? Why don't we just remove these people from the voter rolls? Now, did I explain that okay up to this point?
Yeah, that's what's going on. And the conflict is between Youngkin's executive order and then the National Voter Registration Act, which has this so-called quiet period where you cannot make these mass, decisions affecting potential masses of voters
Right.
90 days before an election, which he passed the executive order exactly 90 days before the election. So that was the conflict that was brought before the Supreme Court. And then without explanation, either on the concurring side or the dissenting side, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Youngkin's executive order. But from a practical standpoint, the problem is that, as you know, and as most of your listeners know, your driver's license is usually valid for about 10 years.
Right.
However, motor voter registrations have always caused problems. So this is a known issue. It certainly could have been addressed way before 90 days before the election.
Mhm.
And sometimes people who were not qualified to vote were unknowingly registered to vote by the DMV.
Yeah.
So it's not just the people who are applying for a driver's license, it's also people, well, mostly people on the DMV side who are doing the registrations. So there are mistakes being made on both sides. But the problem with Youngkin's executive order is that a lot of people who may have self-identified as not being able to vote 3 years ago on their, through applying for a driver's license may now be eligible to vote because, you could be married with a green card for 3 years. Of course, you have a 10-year license. And
Mhm.
then even though when you originally got your license, you were a green card holder, you may now be a citizen. So now if those people are purged from the voter rolls, they don't know to show up on the day of the election with their naturalization certificate, or in some cases where it's just strictly a mistake with their birth certificate, even though Virginia does have same day registration. There's not enough information out there for people to understand that they should bring their naturalization certificate or their birth certificate with them if they were mistakenly purged from the polls.
Now, see, I didn't quite get why Youngkin waited until the last minute. There's that.
Mhm.
I didn't quite get why the Supreme Court allowed it, considering it was the 90 days, because you're right. What's the point in waiting to the last minute when you have an election, immediately going into the election, basically forcing these people to have this kind of new policy just before they go and vote? I didn't quite get that. But I also didn't quite get why the Supreme Court let it go through. And I thought I was missing something. But as you point out, there hasn't necessarily been any commentary in regards to the rationale for the Supreme Court, either the pro or dissenting point of view. Is that normal?
No, that's not normal, and especially under these kinds of exigent circumstances, it's also not normal. So it seems like it was pushed through, and I'm not really sure what the backstory is on the Supreme Court side. On Youngkin's side, obviously it's a political football. He's
Mhm.
just using it to say like, why wouldn't you want non-citizens purged from the voter polls? But that's not really the issue. The issue is that somebody who may have been a non-citizen 3 years ago is now a citizen and eligible to vote, and that person is going to get caught up in this dragnet.
Wow. So in doing the reading for this, if I correct me if I'm wrong, I think it said about 1,600 people were caught up in the dragnet so far. But is that
Mhm.
hypothetical? Do they have numbers to back that up? Or
Yeah, they
is there a larger number of people that may actually be disenfranchised than the 1,600?
it just really depends on like how many green card holders applied for their driver's license during the period in which they're reviewing
Mhm.
and doing the purge on. So, if they're looking at a 5 year span, then there are obviously going to be a lot of now citizens who are going to be purged.
Yeah.
If they're looking at just the last 2 years, it's less likely. But like I said, there are mistakes on both sides. A lot of people mistakenly register to vote. Well, they don't even know they're being registered to vote when they
Yeah.
apply for their driver's license. And even if they did know and they marked themselves off as a non citizen, 3 years after that date, we would expect them to have become a citizen. And of course, your driver's licenses are good for 10 years. So clearly, there are going to be people who are eligible to vote who are going to be purged because of
Mhm.
this action. And there's not, yeah, it really perplexes me as to why the Supreme Court opinion did not give any explanation, either on the concurring side or the dissenting side.
That is super weird. That is
Hmm.
super, super weird. And I guess,
Hmm.
correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like you're saying this could really go both ways. There
Hmm.
could be a group of people who are disenfranchised, and there could be a group of people who actually, wait, are allowed to vote, but shouldn't be able to vote. Is that what you're saying?
Well, what happens in practicality most of the time is the DMV makes a mistake and they register green card holders to vote when green card holders go to get their license, right? And so the green card holder doesn't even know that they're registered to vote. So it
Oh,
wouldn't affect them. It's really more a reflection of the mistakes that are being made on the DMV side.
oh, that's super interesting. Oh, that's super interesting. Oh, that's not good. Because what that sounds like you're saying is through no fault of the individuals at all, that there are a lot of people who are voting who shouldn't be voting because they aren't technically eligible to vote. And I guess the secondary question behind that would be, do we know what that number is? Is there even any kind of estimate in how many of these non-voters out there?
So I should clarify what I meant to say was that on the DMV side, they are registering voters mistakenly when
Right.
green card holders apply for a driver's license. And a green card holder is not allowed to vote because until they become a citizen, obviously.
Yeah.
So there are mistakes being made on the DMV side. And in reality, like in the 17 years or so that I've been practicing immigration law, I've
Mhm.
only had one case of a person who knowingly voted while they were not a citizen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, that's
so
what I
it
mean.
happens very
That's what I
rarely.
mean when I say through no fault of their own. Like they're not
Yeah.
going into the process thinking, I am going to vote and I know I'm not supposed to vote. Basically, I am going to commit fraud.
Mhm.
That's that's not what I think. Based on what you were saying, it sounds like DMV, it sounds like there is a bit of a bug in the system because there's no
Mhm.
way for them to exactly keep track of the people, either the horizon, let's say they get a driver's license and all of a sudden they're eligible, but they hit the box. Or for that matter, DMV registers them to vote, even though they just have a green card and they're not supposed to be eligible to vote. That is, oh, that's unfortunate.
Yeah, that happens. The DMV mistakes happen
Yeah.
all the time. That happens all the time. But the good thing is that when the green card holder is registered to vote by the DMV, they are not even aware most of the time that they've been
Mhm.
registered to vote.
Wow. Just wow. I mean, and I agree with you that that is a good thing that people aren't just massively committing fraud just to commit fraud. 1,000% agree. Um, but this goes to this kind of Democratic argument or this Republican argument that a large number of people or an uncertain number of people are voting not from the fraud angle. It's not like malicious intent. It's not that. Just from willful ignorance and mistakes by the system that is allowing them to do so. Meaning, it's not that somebody is going in with the notion of committing fraud. It's not even that the people in DMV are intentionally allowing them to do that, meaning marketing that allow them to vote. It's just mistakes. It's just screw ups. It's a system that's
Mhm.
somewhat imperfect that is allowing a certain X number of people to vote. And this is where Youngkin is trying to remedy this particular system. I guess from his point of view, it's better to disadvantage some as opposed to allowing anybody to vote. Whereas I guess the other way to look at it is, well, is it better to allow a few people to vote in order to prevent anybody from being disenfranchised? Is that a certain way to look at it?
Yeah, that's exactly the way you can look at it. Is it fair to, disenfranchise even one voter who is entitled to vote? Yeah, and I would say that the risk is too great and the time is too close, and
Yeah.
the mistakes are on the part of the state DMV system for the most part, not on the people, who have the driver's licenses or who have the right to vote or who are green card holders. But like I said, the demographic that I'm concerned about in Governor Youngkin's purge are people who mark themselves off as not eligible to vote because
Right.
they were green card holders at the time, but now they are eligible to vote because they have since become citizens.
But we don't, but do we know how many? Oh, God.
So
It
that
sounds
would
like the
be,
issue
I
here is
think
that the
that
system
would
is
be the
imperfect
largest, the
and
largest
that any
demographic.
correction is going to screw over somebody one way or the other.
That's
Either it's going
right.
to screw over the person who, either somebody's going to vote that shouldn't by accident, or for that matter, somebody's going to be disenfranchised because the governor waited to the last minute. I got to be honest. If I had a bias in this, my bias would be for the governor not to do this. I mean, you shouldn't wait 90 days and be like, all right, now I'm going to deal with this. as opposed to
Yeah.
giving a little bit of leeway in this process, I guess, to allow and even give heads up, give time for the public to kind of figure out where they fall and where they fit into this. I don't know. I didn't realize that it was this screwed up. I don't know a better word for it. It just seems very imperfect. It seems imperfect in a way where Republicans make this argument. Oh, we have massive amounts of fraud and all of these people who are immigrants are voting. And the Democrats are like, well, there's nobody who's doing that. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. Or if it does, it's one every 20 billion people or something. The truth in this one sounds like it's somewhere in the middle. Wow. If you had to give a way to fix this, any ideas on how to, I guess, resolve the discrepancy in the way that it operates?
Well, it's on the DMV side with their motor voter registration procedure, and that's a well-known, long-lasting
Issue.
uh, issue, yes, that they've known about for many, many years. And the fundamental problem is marking somebody as unable to vote when they have a green card and then purging them from the polls when since that time they have become a citizen and they
Yeah.
are now eligible to vote. So that's something that should have been addressed years ago, not 90 days before an election.
You have my complete agreement. I got to be honest, I'm very, what's the word I'm looking for? Cynical in regards to the reason politicians do things. I remember when they were knocking people off the voter rolls for Bernie Sanders. Democrats always complain that Republicans are doing this. And I remember the first election where a Democrat was running against Sanders. And in New York, they took him off the vote. They were knocked like hundreds of thousands of people off the voter rolls. And it ended up being breaking state law and federal law, even though they were basically a slap on the wrist in regards for it. So I'm a bit cynical around this stuff, but this just sounds like a bureaucratic mess more than any malfeasance on anybody's part. I would say, though, that Youngkin should have pushed this out much longer, or at the very least dealt with this not 90 days before an election, especially since, like, specifically 90 days before the election. Susan,
Exactly 90 days.
you have no idea how much I appreciate this, because I saw this story and I was like, okay, well, what is the issue with getting rid of people who are non-citizens? And then as I read the story, it was like, okay, there are about 1,600. And I was like, okay, well, 1,600. Okay, how many of these people do we know are not? Like, it became that kind of rabbit hole that I started working my way through. But at the end of the day, this sounds like a DMV issue and a procedural bureaucratic mess that nobody is even talking about per se in these terms. So that's why I always appreciate you talking about it. So thank you for this. I really appreciate it.
You are welcome. My pleasure.
All right, Susan Pye, just to give her a good send off. Susan Pye has a degree in psychology from UCLA, where she worked with internationally recognized UCLA Brain Mapping Lab. That is just astonishing. She attended law school at University of Louisville and Nyogo University in Japan, and has assisted in the Senate Judiciary Committee on fraud, abuse issues in business, immigration, and civil matters. Susan has also submitted testimony to the House Judiciary Committee on humanitarian immigration issues. Thank you very much. All right, guys, I'm going to call this a day. Susan, thank you very much. You have a good one. Just wow. That is. So I guess the truth is a little bit in the middle. In one sense, Republicans are not necessarily insane when they say there may be people who are not supposed to vote that are voting on some level. I don't know what that number is, but apparently that number is not zero. By the same token, it's not that those people are just committing radical fraud and going out and voting left and right. It has more so to do with the way our old systems that are in place that are screwing us over royally, or at the very least seem somewhat incompetent. So there's that. What is Age of Redemption? Oh, Age of Redemption. Angel of Redemption. I'm sorry. Absolutely. There's so much bad faith. We can fix this immigration for immigrants. They're demonized. Yes, agreed. And institute voter protection on citizens. We keep closing polling locations and making vote. Well, but look, here's the thing. That is not about immigrants. No BS. That's not about immigrants. They're not shutting down polling locations and making it difficult for people to vote because of immigrants. Immigrants might be used as an excuse, but this has more to do with this idea of. Did you ever see this? The guy from the Heritage Foundation. He has this famous video, and he effectively says, "I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by the side with the most votes. Elections are won by the side who can get the most people to the polling locations." I don't want, his argument was, I don't want everybody to vote. The objective is not to get everybody to vote. This is not this kind of la land type of thing. We need to get our people to the polls, and we need to keep their people from getting to the polls. That is the objective. And so when you have things like in the old days, they would say, well, you can use a gun license, but you can't use a student license. Or you would have Operation Crosscheck or Interstate Crosscheck, where they would say, well, this person has the name Jamal Thomas, and it may be in a middle initial L and M, but they don't make the distinction between the two. They were doing stuff like that on purpose. They were doing stuff like that because they wanted to get their people to the polls and other people's not, keep those other people away. There's a reason when the Voter Rights Act was stripped limb from limb that all of a sudden all of these states immediately start changing voter regulations in order to adversely affect certain populations to the benefit of others. So yeah, there is bad faith from the way I look at the stuff from the standpoint of the way political parties operate. And Republicans have been doing this shit for a very long time. By the same token, if you tell me that, well, they self-identified, my first thought is, okay, well, if they self-identify, what's the issue? And of course, as Susan points out, the issue is that they may have self-identified, but a driver's license lasts for like 10 years, 5 years. And over the course of that 5 or 10 years, that person might have been an eligible voter for 3 of those years, for 4 of those years. Hell, for 1 of those years. It doesn't necessarily matter if they're eligible. They're eligible. And because of the way he's doing this law, and for that matter, the reason that because of the Supreme Court allowing it to go through at the very end, 90 days, then by definition, you're going to screw people over. Meaning they're taking this kind of zero-sum approach to keep everybody who could potentially vote illegally while simultaneously disenfranchising people who are eligible voters. And that goes to this whole thing of, would you rather an innocent man be in prison? What they say, I would rather 100 men go, guilty men go free as opposed to an innocent man going to jail. It's that argument. So which one you figure to be the most important? It becomes that. So, yeah. All right. I'm not going to keep this one long. I just wanted a breakdown of what was taking place, and I want to give you all a heads up about what was going on. There's going to be a lot of spin going in both directions. Susan doesn't have a dog in my hunt. We used to bring her on the radio show all the time, and she would just cut through the BS, give it to her straight, and explain what was taking place. So, yeah. Well, thank you, Royce. All right, I'm going to take a break. You guys are listening to the Jamal Thomas After Hours. Like, share. Definitely check me out from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. Monday through Friday. I will be here bright and early, 7 a.m. in the morning doing the news, giving you the news that hopefully, ideally, you love. Have a good one, guys. Talk to you maybe tonight, most likely tomorrow. We'll play it by ear. Have a good one all.